So hello from me too. And so it's a really great pleasure for me to be holding this talk today, especially as I have been, as I said, visiting students at Labyrinth in Hudets in Crete and more recently in Cordeou. And so it's both a pleasure and an honor to my own background. So what I wanted to talk about today is the study of gestures or body movements in music, which is an interdisciplinary field of studies. Sometimes we call it, for short, gesture sound studies. And it is a research area that is concerned about the role of the body in music, or else the relationship between body movements and sound in music. You could say it belongs to a subfield of musicology that is called systematic musicology, which relies on empirical methods and draws on direct observations and designed experiments to gather data and to test hypotheses. And myself, I have been heavily relying on technology too, both audio and motion capture technology, but I've combined these with methods from ethnomusicology, as I've been working a bit more with Hindustani vocal music. So you understand very quickly that it has been a very interdisciplinary approach, which also fits to my background because it's a very multidisciplinary background. I studied physics, I did music technology, and then music computing combined with ethnomusicology. So let me begin. The first part of the presentation is a bit more like a theory. Like I'm trying to place this type of research within a broader historical framework to explain why it is believed that gestures matter so much in music. So, for much of its history, at least traditional Western musicology has approached music primarily through written notation. That is the symbolic representation of a musical work, mostly from the composer's point of view. And this approach has largely overlooked the fact that music is fundamentally a performing art, something that is experienced and enacted in time through the body, not merely read or written. Later scholars began to pay greater attention to performance itself, partly also because of the invention of sound recording technologies, by listening to recordings and analyzing the audio signal to understand how a work is expressively interpreted by performers. And more recently, within, I would say, the last 15 years or a bit more, we have seen a further shift towards the physical and bodily dimension of musical experience, studying the way movements are performed to make or to perceive music, to listen to music. And this shift has been accelerated by two key developments. The first, by the advances and the price drop of motion capture technologies like the ones used for animation in the film industry, which were once exclusive to animation studios but have now become more accessible and more affordable to research institutions and universities. And the second, I would say a bit more fundamental, these studies are inspired by theories of embodied cognition, which argue that the body plays a central role in experiencing our world, not a peripheral one, as we used to think. So traditionally, cognition was seen as a brain-centered process. The mind was supposed to function almost like a computer's CPU, rational, detached from the body, and doing all the important work, like thinking, processing, and decision making. And the body used to be considered having a peripheral role, just inputting and outputting information between body and environment, a bit like the keyboard or the screen of the computer. So embodied cognition theories challenge this view. They suggest that cognition is not confined to the brain, but it is distributed across the mind, the body, and the surrounding environment. And most importantly, they claim that knowledge is action-oriented. And that means that we don't learn just because objects lie around us, but through our interactions with them. And those interactions are defined by both the properties of the object and the shape of our own body, what we can do with it. And according to this understanding, um, according to this, our understanding of the world is shaped by repeated patterns of interactions we have experienced in the past and small variations of them. And one of the most compelling findings supporting these ideas was the discovery of the so-called mirror neurons. And these are motor neurons, the ones responsible for movement, that fire not only when we perform an action but ourselves, but also when we observe someone else doing it. And in practice, this means that we perceive actions of others by internally simulating them. And this makes perception not passive, but an inherently active process. And what is even more fascinating is that mirror neurons do not just respond to the visual perception of movement. They also activate when we simply listen. For example, when somebody is playing music, it is believed that we internally simulate the movements we think must have produced these sounds we hear. So even without moving ourselves, we kind of feel the motion in the music. And this takes us to one of the core ideas of embodied music cognition, that our perception is inherently multimodal, which means that we perceive our environment, and more specifically music in this case, not just through our ears, but by integrating information from a number of sensory modalities, such as hearing, vision, touch, and movement. And when I say movement, I mean proprioception, the sense of position, kinesthesia, the sense of movement or displacement, and the vestibular sense, which is a sense of balance. For instance, I think this will make sense. If you take a look at the right-hand side of the image, you see two graphs, two shapes. And one of the classic examples is if I ask you to associate each of these shapes with each of those words, taqueta and maluma, which one would you associate with which? And it's always the case that people say that taqueta fits better the angular image on the left, and maluma the more circular on the right, because the sound taqueta is more fricative, sharp, and explosive than maluma, which is softer, rounder, and smoother. So there's this kind of correspondence between the shape in the image and the shape in the sound. And this is also why we tend to believe that there is a profound relationship between body movement and sound that develops over the years and is worth studying. For instance, if we have played basketball for some time, we develop a kind of hardwired connection between our movements and the sound of the ball. And we can even anticipate the sound just by watching someone dribble on the TV, even if the TV is muted, simply because we have embodied that experience or a similar one. And this profound relationship is believed to apply to music too. Not only in the tight coupling between body movement and sound in sound-producing gestures, such as when striking the string of an instrument or hitting a drum, where we know that, for example, striking something harder will produce louder sounds, but also in looser relationships, such as those found between the voice and hand gestures while singing. And these are gestures that do not directly produce sounds themselves. So for musicians, this might seem obvious, but it is only relatively recently that research has started to take this seriously and study it in more depth. And relatively, I don't mean 2 years, but a bit more. So embodiment is in fact especially prominent in informal oral music traditions that do not rely on written notation and in which knowledge is actually transmitted directly from teacher to student through demonstration, emulation, and repetition in face-to-face settings. Crucially, this transmission sensory physical information. And such a case is Hindustani music, with which I have worked a bit more extensively. So I thought it would be nice to take you through my personal story about why and how I approached this topic on gesture sound studies the way I did. So, back in 2008, I wanted to start my PhD on audio interaction. And audio interaction refers to the use of digital or computer-based systems that allow users to interact with sound in real time through computational processes. And this may include, first of all, the programming a computer to generate synthetic algorithmic sounds, and also designing suitable ways or interfaces for interacting with the computer through our body movements in order to generate or control these sounds in real time, ideally in an expressive way. And for this, we rely on a variety of sensors, technologies, and methods to be able to track information about how the body moves and connect them to the parameters of the sound producing algorithm. The challenge, though, is how to meaningfully connect the often many movement variables captured by the sensors with the numerous parameters of the sound producing algorithm that need to be controlled. So in sound producing gestures in our analog world, this problem does not exist, as this connection is determined by the laws of physics. As I said before, when you strike a membrane harder, you expect it to sound louder, more or less. The sonic outcome in this case is defined by the physical and geometric properties of the vibrating membrane, and that's the material, the size, the thickness, the tension, I don't know what else, the shape, and by the way, of course, the hand has hit the membrane. In the digital world, however, this gesture sound link does not exist, does not pre-exist. It's not defined by physics. We need to artificially design it. And most of the times, people rely purely on intuition and a trial and error process to develop these gesture sound links, or mappings, as they're called. And therefore, it may happen that the gesture we perform does not match the sound it produces, which breaks the experience. It makes it feel unnatural. So I started wondering whether we could possibly ground these gesture sound mappings by learning from our analog world, and especially by relying on archetypical gestures we are especially familiar with. Think, for example, the sensation of stretching an elastic material. And everyone has this experience of the dynamics in interacting with such a material, even if it doesn't produce any sounds. So I thought it would be nice to find ways to make it sound. And there was an idea in the 90s called sound sculpting, where a person manipulates a virtual object that is only graphically illustrated to control synthetic sounds. But even then, these gesture sound mappings were developed simply intuitively. So the idea took off when I turned to a long existing oral music tradition where gesture and sound are deeply intertwined. So, out of luck, I found myself at a Drupat Hindustani singing workshop in a little village in the north part of Greece, led by Ustad Zia Fariduddin Dagar. And in fact, I was following an oud seminar with Yurdal Tokcan in Hudetsi at Labyrinth, discussing with somebody about how thrilled I was with this Yaman recording by his brother, Zia Mohiuddin Dagar, when I found out about this workshop. And in fact, I met Christos there at this workshop. So the fine and expressive gestures of Ustad during class really struck me. I should note here that in Hindustani music, perhaps everybody's aware, but perhaps it's better to mention it. There is a strong sense of pitch as a continuum. So melodic phrases often involve smooth pitch glides, imagined as trajectories in an imagined pitch space. And these are frequently accompanied by hand gestures in real space too. In fact, musicians consider the space between the notes as equally important, if not even more important, I would dare to say, as the discrete notes, which makes it a good candidate, of course, to study links to the also continuous gestures. But what struck me the most were specific gestures Ustad would perform whenever he tried to help us repeat difficult phrases that we would find otherwise hard to follow, which looked as if he was holding and manipulating something like an object with his hands, which was only imagined, of course. And sometimes it looked like stretching an elastic band, other times like pulling or throwing something. And each time, his movements suggested a negotiation with a kind of imagined resistive force, either opposing this force or yielding to it. And these were often accompanied by facial expressions of increased tension. I don't know if Christos remembers this fact. And out of the few verbal instructions he ever gave us, what I found most striking was when he told us, try to repeat this phrase while imagining that you are dipping your hands underwater, or you may think that it is like pulling a spring or an elastic band. So it was something that had to be conveyed by the voice too, it seemed. I also observed how his senior students, Nirmalia Day and Marianne Svasek, during that workshop, moved a bit like their teacher when trying to repeat his phrases. But let me play this short excerpt and so that you can also hear the sound. And it is not only with Faridud Dagger. One may observe such gestures with other Hindustani singers too. Such gestures do not carry any symbolic meaning, it seems, nor does it seem to be simply about tracing spatial trajectories or geometries in space. It's not just about the up and down or left and right in space. What seems to matter just as much is a sense of effort. I realized that the performer seems to be exerting as if acting against some resistive force that he must overcome to move the sound. And this led me to the hypothesis that certain melodic patterns in the voice might reflect the level of effort singers imagine they would exert when interacting with real materials, which would be defined by the physical properties of these objects. So I also wondered if we can find analytical descriptions of the way gesture and sound are linked through effort in Drupad singing. Could we perhaps take advantage of these mappings in digital audio interactive systems, especially those that lack the sense of touch? Perhaps this could offer a new interaction paradigm, a more physically intuitive way to materialize and control sound beyond Hindustani music by giving users the opportunity to imitate the feeling of handling real resistive materials and make up for the lack of haptic feedback when, example, interacting with digital sounds while being tracked by a camera. But before developing these analytical descriptions, I had to figure out a few things which actually formed the core of my project. The first is whether there was any consistency in how sound, gesture, and effort come together in the first place, or if it was all arbitrary. Secondly, I also needed to see whether these relationships, in case they did exist, were unique to each performer, revealing idiosyncratic tendencies, or whether they followed patterns that could be observed across different singers. And thirdly, and finally, I had to disambiguate between effort that reflects more conceptual aspects of melodic organization from the straightforward mechanical requirements for vocal production. So, and I hope this moves, yes. So I traveled across India with a large amount of state-of-the-art equipment for audio and motion capture, setting up temporary laboratories in domestic spaces, the living rooms of the Drupad musicians I worked with. And I would ask them to wear these reflective markers that you see in the animation film industry and record them with a rig of interconnected high-speed infrared cameras that I would set up and calibrate for hours before each recording. So I focused only on the gestural interactions we discussed earlier and only on the first part of improvisation, the alap improvisation, which is supposed to be unmetered and slow and is sung to a repertoire of non-meaningful syllables, as I wanted to avoid associations with lyrics and only focus on melodic aspects. So what made this project unique, I believe, was the combination of methods from both ethnomusicology and engineering. So most research tends to focus either on qualitative insights like interviews and observations, or on controlled laboratory experiments with pre-designed stimuli capturing and analyzing motion and audio data. I try to combine both sides directly in the field by recording and analyze interviews, audiovisual material, and audio and motion data of real music performances without giving any instructions to the performers. And this put me and the project, of course, in a challenging position, as I had to juggle multiple roles that would normally require a whole team. And the project was placed also at risk for the size of the data collection, since recording full performances without any instructions meant I could be recording only a few of the gestures I was after. So the interview analysis focused on the conception of melody as movement by the participants. And what came through in the interviews was how strongly musicians connect music with visual imagery and physical sensations, as they made extensive use of motor-based metaphors and mental images of forces or resistance and other tactile terms when speaking about music. Additionally, some musicians acknowledge the importance of visual engagement with the gestures of the teacher that may lead to the inheritance of gesturing habits. And they admitted that although gestures are not explicitly taught by teachers, students will be occasionally discouraged from doing the wrong movements. Then the video observation analysis of the audiovisual material was made by me and cross-validated by two choreographers. And it aimed to get the first insight of the phenomena and also to draw some first conclusions on these cross-modal associations. So I annotated gesture classes, effort levels, and various other melodic aspects related to the raga. And just to play a short clip, perhaps. They are very short, they're just fragments. I don't know if it sounds you can hear it clearly. This is yeah, it's an ornament called gammak, and it's like compressing something that is elastic. So these annotations were then used as the correct responses, let's say, of regression models that I developed in the statistical analysis, by which I was trying to infer effort levels and classify gestures between two types of gestures based on a small set of acoustic and movement features that I extracted from the captured audio and motion data. And here you can see a 3D graphic display of the so-called stick figure. In other words, the skeleton of the performer's upper body that is created from the motion data. So this is the basis on which somebody can also create animation figures. So the overall results, let's say, coming out of this, so unrelated or arbitrary with respect to effort levels. Some interesting tendencies of effort sound gesture associations were indeed observed with a certain degree of consistency for each individual performer. However, effort levels and gesture types seem to be more strongly linked to acoustic features rather than to movement features. And furthermore, this consistency varies across performers, with acoustic features again exhibiting greater cross-performer consistency than movement features. And in summary, this means that acoustic features are more important than movement features for inferring effort levels or classifying gesture types that have been annotated predominantly visually. And this may indicate, among other things, of course, different idiosyncratic gesturing styles or a suboptimal selection of movement features that are used in the models. However, and even despite this flexible and often idiosyncratic nature of individual gesturing, there is some evidence of more generic gesture sound relationships too, and the clearest is what I called cross-modal morphological analogy in terms of directional asymmetry, and I will talk about this in a bit. Finally, physical effort appears to reflect both the biomechanical requirements of vocal production and more conceptual aspects of melodic organization and intention by the performer. And each performer follows a different pattern in respect to this, it seems. So, what is the biomechanical? The biomechanical aspect refers to the effort required for singing higher notes or for larger ascending pitch glides. So you see in the upper scatter plot how effort increases with mean pitch, and in the lower plot with a pitch interval of the ascending part of melodic movements. And I should also note that ascending melodic movements seem to require more effort than descending. And the two colors you see here are the two gesture classes, the more elastic ones and the ones that look as if just moving an object in space. So the conceptual aspect of effort, what can it refer to? First of all, and I think this was the most interesting finding, the pitch space organization of the melodic mode of the raga. So for some performers, we observe higher levels of effort in specific pitch areas of potential melodic activity around unstable pitches in each octave according to the specific raga, those areas which call for a rise in melodic tension. Such a case is the seventh degree for Raga Jaunpuri, which was recorded by Afzal Hussein. So it's a pitch that is approached predominantly from below and then falls down to the sixth degree. On the left side, you see a transcription of a part of the improvisation in Raga Jaunpuri by Afzal Hussein, where these melodic movements around the seventh degree all appear to receive higher effort levels, those that I have noted with red. than other movements in the lower part of the octave. And another conceptual aspect is the melodic context, meaning the melodic intention of the melody moving towards a stable note where the melodic tension is usually resolved, such as the tonic or the fifth in what follows the melodic movement that accompanies the gesture. And on the right, you can see a schematic where I have kind of color plotted the effort according to the lower or upper part of the octave for Raga Jaunpuri again. And you can also see how this relates to where melodic tension finally gets resolved, the tonic or the fifth. Another conceptual aspect is the macrostructure of the alap improvisation. So we see progressively higher effort with elapsed time, which appears to follow the gradual pitch ascent and the progressive buildup of melodic tension, as you can see in the lower plot for Umakant Guntecha in Raga Pupali, mostly, of course, in this case, for the red type of gestures, the stretching ones. And just a note here, the upper graph illustrates the macrostructure of the alap improvisation in terms of melodic development, but it's for another raga, it's for Raga Jaunpuri. I just wanted to have something to show how the pitch ascends over time towards the climax and then returns and tension gets released around the middle tonic. And finally, and here I don't know what's happening. I hope this cannot play image. I don't know why. I don't know why. Perhaps I didn't load this video. Sorry. I will check it later in case I can find it and play it for you. So the final and the one that is for which I have found the highest cross-performer gesture sound effort association is what I called morphological cross-modal analogies in terms of directional asymmetry. And if this video would have played, which did play until like a few minutes ago, we see that if you have an increase in some acoustic aspect, it will be matched to the increase in some gestural aspect and similarly to the level of effort and vice versa. So, for example, when a singer moves as if stretching or compressing something elastic, a gesture involving two opposing directions, the voice typically follows a double-sloped pitch glide, rising and then falling, and the physical effort mirrors that same shape with intensification and subsequent release. So, if we could have seen this, it would have looked similar to Afzal Hussein before, where he looked like stretching something. And the lower graph illustrates one of the two graphs is the pitch, and the other is the sound level. So let's call it loudness. So based on all these findings, I could argue that gesturing in Drupad singing is guided by three things: the know-how of humans in interacting and exerting effort on real objects of the environment, the movement-sound relationships transmitted from teacher to student in the oral music training context, and also the mechanical demands of vocalization. And more recently, I've been working on extending this data set. So if you were in Cardedeu in 2023, if I'm not wrong, I've lost track of time, you might have come across someone really tired carrying around laptops, tripods, cameras, and other equipment, which I've been using with Pelva Naik during her seminar on Drupad singing. So lately I've been working on using newer, non-intrusive technologies for motion tracking to avoid asking the participant to wear sensor suits. And it is something that I potentially aim to use in participatory studies where I can be the student myself at the same time as I'm recording the data. So here you see some attempts to track Pelva with a single or with multiple cameras. These are the two little animations that you see on the right-hand side, which is still work in progress. So it still needs work and adjustments in lighting conditions and setup, and also the use of filters to reduce noise. But I think we will get there eventually. So it looks like this. it does need more work, but we're getting there. And it's also, I mean, this is an open source software we're trying to take advantage of because there are other alternatives that are paid and are expensive, but we're trying to do it the other way. So more recently, and that's the last slide, I think, I have started working also from a purely ethnomusicological perspective this time by analyzing interviews on the challenges that arise in the embodied aspects of distance learning for Hindustani music, specifically in video-mediated real-time lessons. So over the past 15 years or more, Drupad education has been undergoing a remarkable shift from the intimate one-to-one apprenticeship model to group workshops and later to online classes, which is an interesting observation considering the insistence of gurus on the traditional ideal model of enculturation, the so-called Guru Shishya Parampara, or teacher-disciple tradition in English, to such an extent that even the use of recording devices was not permitted during lessons when I was in India in 2010. So from the interviews with musicians about their nowadays experience with online teaching, two main perspectives emerged. On one hand, some participants focused on the lack of nonverbal multisensory cues. Especially students seem to find this absence challenging for musical communication and learning. On the other hand, others, mainly teachers, uh, tended to place more emphasis on the content itself rather than the medium, which suggests that they seemed better equipped to adapt and compensate for the limitations of technology and distance. Interestingly, the word space came up often in interviews, which makes sense since Drupad musicians often describe melody as movement through an imaginary pitch space, not just a series of notes. So findings show that in Drupad online teaching, the limited transmission of nonverbal, embodied, and multimodal cues through video calls, as well as the lack of a shared physical and spatial context, makes it harder for teacher and student to truly connect. Online, the space that is shared between teacher and student is disrupted, and this appears to weaken the sense of attunement and immersion, which are crucial in traditional music education. So, as a result, video conferencing tools seem to me better suited for transferring formal knowledge like music theory or notation, rather than the more experiential and embodied aspects central to oral traditions like Hindustani. Many of the subtle non-verbal interactions that work in physical lessons simply don't translate well online. That said, some interviewees noted that over time, online engagement did improve as participants became more familiar with each other and adapted to the space, the surroundings, and the technology itself. Their sense of presence and connection seemed to grow. And this seems to suggest that while online teaching poses challenges, people can gradually adjust and find new ways to connect through mediated environments. So these are my main points, and I think the rest is better to remain in discussion. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stella.
Hi, thank you.
It was very interesting, very intense.
Sorry.
No, intense in the sense
Oh,
of
okay.
a lot of information, very interesting. Nice, nice. Are there any comments or questions from participants? Yeah, Jan and then Giuliano. It's Jean or Jan or
It's either of them. It's actually French. Don't worry about it. So hi, and nice to meet you. And
Hi, nice meeting you.
thank you for the lovely presentation. I was listening and I was like, oh my God, this is such serious work. This is super scientific. I was really surprised. So I have a couple of observations that I have made, and I just want to run them by you. All right, see what you think about it. First of all, I'm Lebanese, and so our tradition is the tradition of let's say Middle Eastern modal music, if we want to call it that. There's no name for that, but if you want to name it that, let's do that. And so part of it is studying these set pieces that are called muashahat. And so as the teacher is teaching us, I think I heard you say that in the sort of a Hindu sphere, there is no actual gestures that are actually taught. But when you do the wrong gestures, sometimes the teacher will kind of frown upon you, and then you will correct. We were told how to kind of do the beat in our hands, and that was part of the mandatory training. So the teacher will go like, this is dum, this is tak, and then S will be in the air, and then you're gonna have to do it after the teacher, one after the other. So that's one of the observations. So people would do that with their hands to kind of to transmit the beat. They will sometimes do other gestures to transmit the dynamics. So a very famous gesture that exists in our culture, I don't know if it's worldwide, but the performer will kind of do this with their hands. Sometimes with something with their face as well. So they will kind of do this, and then they would with a smile, and this kind of signals piano. So as the voice kind of lowers, they're gonna do this, and it pisses me off so much as someone watching the performance. But then I found myself doing it sometimes, and so I was like, there's something about that. So maybe you have something to say about
Jan, sorry to interrupt you, but who's doing that? The performer or the listeners?
the performer.
Performer, okay.
Imagine you're singing the piece, and then you have the band behind you. Let's say 2 or 3 people.
I'm taking a pen.
You will kind of turn to them with a slight angle because you always want to face the audience, and you will do that, and the volume will start dropping just slightly, very slowly, and so the band, every musician in our sphere understands what this means. And nobody taught us. Nobody told us that, okay, when you see the singer do this, please lower the voice. Please make it calmer. If the rhythm player was playing, sometimes they will shut up completely. Sometimes they will stop using the snares. They will only use the what do you call it? The leather part of the drum, so that it just lowers the volume. It lowers the energy bit by bit. So I can go for hours. I never realized that this was a sphere of study. But yeah. So just simply, if you have anything to comment on this, or if you studied this, or if you observed this at all, that anything you say would be amazing. Thanks.
First of all, thank you very much for the comments, and it's nice to open a window to to new ideas. So first of all, about the rhythm with the hands in Hindustani, they also have the same thing, that perhaps not in the same way, but they do have claps that are closed and claps that are open, and they do encourage students to learn how to do this while counting and learning the rhythms. But my focus has been on the melodic elements, and this is exactly the reason why I have been only focusing and recording the first part of the alap that is supposed to be unmetered. So as soon as the rhythm starts, you have less space to perform these expressive melodic, expressive gestures that are associated with the melodic aspects of the performance, because you start clapping with one hand. Even performers themselves will start doing it, and so you have less space, especially if you're holding the tampura on the other hand, and you also only have one free hand. There's less space to do all that. So for this reason, I only kept the first part of the improvisation. And for the second reason that I told you, because I didn't want to have any lyrics, I didn't want to have the compositional part of the performance. So about the rhythm, indeed, they do it too. But it was out of my own focus. And I will also comment on the second part of your ideas, and then I will get back to the first again. So this thing that you said, I don't know it. I have never seen it before, sorry. But it's very interesting. The thing is, if you just focus on just what is happening, that is this gesture, then you start just mentioning the symbolic part of the gesture, that it's this thing, that it's associated with the symbol of needing to go piano. So I've been less interested in symbols. There are other people who are more focused, for instance, on mudras, on the symbolic part of these gestures in association to the sound. But I was not, my focus was not on that. My focus was on the expressive aspect, the way a gesture is performed, rather than which gesture it is. So in your case, if we're talking about this it could be this, but I wouldn't be interested if it's just the symbol. I would be interested about in how this is performed, if it's this or the way it's done. So this would have been my main focus if I would have worked on these gestures. And the same I would say could apply to the rhythmic patterns of gestures. I mean, you can do just this, but you can do it more expressively too, perhaps. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, got it. Thanks. Because all of these are kind of expressive means. So just like the orchestra master, they will do certain movements, but they're trying to communicate something. So whatever it is that you're studying is not communicative at all. It's just expressive as you perform. Got it.
That's also a gray zone, I would say, because
Okay.
some you might call it just simply expressive, but if somebody's on stage, he might be putting on that expression a bit more just for the theatrical part of the performance. So it's a gray zone. But yeah, I'm really more interested in the expressive aspects, let's call it like that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I thank you.
Just to comment that if you were in Greece and you do that, it means you want money. It would be fine
And
because
Oh no. That we have that as well. So
ah,
if you do it with the two fingers like that, especially with your tongue out, because people used to do that and then count the money. So if you do that, that's money.
ah,
If you involve the entire hand,
okay.
the entire.
the whole thing. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because you mentioned that they are kind of invoking some physical properties.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
in my mind, maybe I don't know, but in my mind, this is probably trying to involve
Mm.
friction. So that
Friction, yes.
like yeah, so there's like something. Imagine you're holding like some fabric like this
Yep.
thing, and you're doing this, and you're doing it roughly. It makes a sound, but if you do it very slow, the sound disappears. So they're probably trying to communicate to the entire band that okay, shut down the sound so that this doesn't make it sound.
This
Something
really
like.
makes sense now. Now I got it because with this, just this, I didn't get it before. So perhaps you can send me a video. I would love to check it out.
Oh, there's plenty of them.
Okay, I didn't know.
If you, I'll try to find something very obvious, but
Okay.
every pop star, it doesn't have to be classical music. Every pop star in the Arab world is
Okay.
doing this all the time.
Okay.
Oh, there's another one
100%.
actually, but they try. Some of them are players, some of them aren't. But you will see them using their left hand to indicate that they are doing some vibrato. Sometimes
Okay.
they're kind of missing the point completely, but because they want to convey that, oh, we are musicians, we play instruments. So as they're doing the kind of vibrato or they're doing some movement, I don't know, they will start doing this with their left hand as if they are playing the oud, right? So they're trying to convey that, oh, I'm going up and down now. So with that, so yeah, you will find these all over the place. And the more pretentious the pop star is, the more they will do these things. You will see that.
Well, one of the ideas I've had is that perhaps there is a link between this stretching idea and what you would do to produce a pitch glide on a Rudravina. So for the Rudravina, you need to really bend the string. You need to, pull it down, and it has this elastic element in it. So perhaps it's a kind of, taking example from that.
Giuliano,
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Super nice to see a bit of your work and very very fascinated. And of course, I didn't follow the direction, but I've been seeing what has been done, and it's a fascinating topic. Yeah, I was curious on because of course Drupal has this very particular characteristic of being extremely gestural and extremely like the gesture is perhaps even more present than in other traditions. But I was curious if within other musical traditions you've also investigated, or also with non-singers such as musicians, if there is space also to correlate, let's say, these different musical traditions.
Mm. So yes, Drupad is very embodied. That's true. I've realized that too. Um, you're talking about these particular gestures, I guess, this which look as if interacting with some object. I guess you're referring to those because there are many types of gestures, so we would be lost. So for these particular gestures, the ideas might be hiding in other music genres too. I don't think it's exclusivity of the Drupad genre of Hindustani music in general, but the fact that, but to see these gestures so vividly and so how is it called in English? To be extroverted, to appear. This is something I've not really come across in other music genres, and one should also consider and keep in mind that it would be difficult to see that in instrument playing. So as soon as somebody starts to play an instrument, then you have to produce the sounds. It's about producing gestures. So the fact that we are examining singing gestures makes it very interesting because the main mechanical part of sound production is out of the way, and you have more space to focus on the more conceptual aspects. And this is exactly the reason why I was trying to also examine whether there are any mechanical aspects in it, because I wanted to exclude those and focus only on the conceptual ones. So singing gestures are very interesting in this aspect. So in terms of singing gestures, I haven't seen this in other music genres. I have seen melographic gestures in other music genres, talking about up and down, left and right, or closer to the body, further away from the body. All that, yes. But this idea of almost having something as a material between the hand that you interact with, in terms of resistance and force, something that really helps you materialize the sound, I haven't really seen. The ideas behind it, though, do exist, and I think Laura Leante she has written a paper where she mentions the example of a bagpipe player, where he does explain verbally these ideas about having something that is elastic and you can compress it and it expands and stuff like that, but not really as vividly shown gesturally as in Drupad, I think.
Yes, but do you think, as a, let's say, area of study, this idea of correlating the bodily movement with the music, of course, this can also be replicated in other musical traditions, and
in any musical tradition. This is really a fundamental relationship. It's just that in my case, I wanted to focus on these particular types of interactions because I had this motivation for the digital interaction. That made sense for me.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would have a short. I mean, I would have many questions, but probably I'll get to one or two of them. Now that you mentioned that this was what was the motivation, I would like to, if you can elaborate more, if you have a goal to the research, or if it's just a research for the sake of finding out new things. And thank you for doing it. It's incredible.
Thank you. So, isn't this the same? No. So yeah, the motivation was really to be able to develop such an interactive system. Not that I've gone that far, because you start with a really large idea and you think you can do everything, but actually you're always bolted down to, first of all, answering some very fundamental questions first. So I started with this idea of being able to develop such a system, but I ended up first of all exploring and understanding a bit better how it works in Hindustani music. So let's say the goal would be to really create such a system where you prime somebody and you tell them, okay, you have a computer in front of you. This computer can produce sounds in a gesturally expressive way. You are being tracked by a camera or something. And just keep in mind that the way you can interact with these sounds is by thinking that you are really applying force and effort on something that does not exist, but you should imagine it does. So it's like imitating the contra force you would be feeling as if the object was really there. So it's like trying to make up for the absence of this force feedback that you normally have when really touching an object. So if you take something and you pull it, you feel the force feedback. But without it, when you don't interact with it, when you don't touch something, then this it lacks force feedback. And the sense of touch is supposed to be very, very fundamental in our everyday life and our understanding of the world. So the next step, and I've started working on this too, is to also try to, I mean, from the work you saw, what I called effort was actually me annotating the level of effort as a perceptual aspect. So it's something that you cannot directly go and measure with some device effort. It's something that has to do with your understanding of how much this person you're looking at you think is struggling to do a gesture. So it's a perceptual aspect. There's no cold way of measuring it objectively. So the next step would be to find ways to be able to measure that. And one of the straightforward thoughts would be, okay, if we try to measure muscle force, so electromyography, and this is what I have started working on. And with Pelva also, I've been using these bracelets that do that. And I've also, I think I stopped the sharing, but I've started working on this with Yosamin Shah Hosseini on the oud playing. So we did a study where I let her just play stronger strikes to see whether they are associated, the louder sound is associated with higher muscle tension, which was not the case. So it wasn't proven. Of course, I need to redo the study because there are several issues about how the study was run, like where she started doing the gesture actually. But well, to answer your question, because I'm saying too much, to answer your question in short, the big idea would be to be able to develop such digital interactive audio systems where the person can drive and control these sounds based on the idea that he's interacting with some imaginary object, imitating forces and efforts as if he was really holding it.
Thank you. Yes, it reminded me a lot of what you were saying about this imaginary object, because we are actually dealing with, you can say, I'm a spiritual person, and I studied some Taoism and Hinduism. So in Taoism, in Tai Chi, Qigong, you deal with energy, right? And there are a lot of practices that deal with this imaginary ball or just a field of energy, right?
Okay.
That might be of interest for you. And the other thing that this whole story reminded me of personally, right, from my personal experience, would be what I experienced when I busk. I play a lot on the street, right? So when I also love to move. I do some dancing for years now. But when I play the violin, and any instrument, but let's take the violin. When I play the violin, I also love to move, and I understand that what it struck me a lot when you said that that the listener is imagining. I don't know if I do that, but the listener is imagining the movement that should be done in order to produce the sound that he or she hears, right? This is a very interesting point. I will elaborate on that, like in my own thinking. But I've noticed that when I move more, of course it's only natural, it's only human. When I move more, and it's not like I do it for theatrical reasons. I move. I can let it. I can make it like I can do it on purpose, like with not on purpose, but with an intention, right? And when I do. There are a lot of children gathering around and wanting to dance, right? Even like grown-ups, adults, they tend to react to my movement, right? Yes, it was just a thing to
well,
share.
that's many ideas packed in one. So this idea of the fact that we imitate, even when if we listen to sounds, we kind of imitate the movement that must have produced the sounds, or we think must have produced the sounds. This is not something we do necessarily intentionally. This just happens. So if you do fMRI and you let somebody listen to sounds and you do fMRI at the same time, you realize that there is this firing of this motor area of the brain. So that's it. About moving to sound and helping you understand what you need to do, or captivating others, perhaps. Well, I've had these discussions with musicians, and many told me that, for example, Marianne Svasek, she told me, okay, I was having once this hard time reproducing this really difficult phrase that Bahaudin was giving me, Bahaudin Dagar. And at some point he told me, you're doing a wrong movement. Your hand is twisting in a wrong way. You should do it the other way around. You should do this. And the moment he told me that, it just released the idea, and I could really follow with my voice. So it does help materialize these ideas in music. And about children gathering, perhaps the reason is that instead of just listening, they just also see. So it's really the fact that they combine the senses. It's more captivating. It's richer in terms of senses.
Thank you, Maya.
Thank you.
De Guillem, you wanted to ask something, to comment something.
Yes, just a little bit, because I'm not good in English, so maybe it will be. But I want to say thank you, and it's so great for me to hear all of that, Maya, and also because I'm a musician and I'm doing also mask. I'm a mask player, a full mask. So I use my body, like you said, your contra-force, your force, your with mime, and it's so I understand very much this. And for the first time I do the so the music and the mask, the physical work, I do in my mind the the link for the first time, and I think that all the people there doing that. So I'm happy because I live a lot of experience with this, with Armenian music, with the Ison. As a material, we can it's really physical with the hand, and we were doing that for hours together to feel really the weight of the sound we need in the space, and it was fascinating. And also with Frank Kane, with Georgian songs. Georgian polyphonic songs, and he's doing this in the space, and to feel the sound, really the material of the sound, and he's doing also with dramatic and movements with dramatic meaning. So I wanted to say that it's really, they are related. So I can't say in English because my English is so bad. But
I totally understood. In fact, I had a question about this weight idea in Armenian music. So, how do you do this exercise, and in what sense do you describe weight? What is heavier and what is lighter in that sense? If you can explain that.
It was my first time in Paris with an Armenian chorus, I don't know, Armenian group.
Choir?
And chorus, yes, chorus. They was doing that for years. And I came only one one evening, and they were doing so the master was doing some to have the good weight to the Ison. It was doing the Ison. So the same notes, all the people were doing the same notes, and just feeling this together and work with the master. We were doing something.
Okay. What weight is in this case is a big question, and I had the same question even in Hindustani. It's not something to immediately answer. It's something that, so the problem here, and I face the same problem with effort. These are all descriptions. These are all qualitative descriptions of something that we feel, but it's not easy to measure directly. So you have to how's it called to first explain, to first make sense of what this exactly is. So the first time I started talking about forces and effort and blah blah blah, I started talking about weight. The first word that came was weight. So I tried to run a very short study with a friend who is a Hindustan. He plays Drupad, where I asked him, I think in Jaunpuri, in Raga Jaunpuri, to annotate which parts of these melodic movements he considers to be heavier. And it was not what I thought it would be. So the word weight meant something else to him than what it meant to me or to others. So there's a whole issue of interpreting, first of all, what the words mean to each person. And this is the first step always. Because now you say about weight and choir and polyphony, but what exactly it is in this particular exercise needs to be clarified first, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. It's very hard to have words really fine words to something in the body.
Exactly.
Something we don't have words, so that's why I'm doing mask, because I'm trying to understand that without words.
Yeah, that's great. This mask idea is fantastic because the body movements need to be more pronounced and more vivid.
Just to comment something, if I may, that when you're talking about the body and that things we feel are very different to express and name, and what is your naming, what you're feeling, sometimes it's easier to compare. It's easy to compare and be very objective. Let's say that in the last half an hour, for example, I was feeling more heavy, and now I'm feeling lighter. You know, or this, for example, I think the experience that many people might have is that when they relax, usually they feel a bit lighter. There is the case when you're very tired and you realize how tired you were, and then you feel a bit heavier. Or when you're going to sleep, no. Sometimes when we are reaching sleep, we either feel heavier or lighter. But the sensations. So also, and I say this also a bit thinking in the Feldenkrais sessions we did in the last labyrinths in Cardedeu this year and the last year. I think it's interesting when you have a shared experience through a class or a concert or musical practice, to have a kind of a shared experience and then talk about it. It's less, let's say, ethereal, no? The descriptions we use, and I find it interesting that how we can even maybe clarify or have more information about what can possibly connect sound, movement, and state of the body.
That's a very good point. That's true. First of all, I mean, I would never compare in absolute terms the effort that different people perceive from a performance. So it's not about the absolute way of doing it, but it's exactly the comparative, the relative way. But even in that case, the use of a word sometimes is misleading. So when I primed, let's call it like that, as if it's an experiment, when I primed this friend of mine with the word of weight for annotating different parts of melodic movement in the raga, where I was expecting him to annotate, for example, this movement around the knee as heavier than the lower part or others, it wasn't that straightforward. It wasn't really exactly what I was expecting. So you're right. And usually we normalize the values when we need to do work like that. So that it's not about absolute values, but relative. True.
I have some questions about noted from your talk. When you first started and said this about the cognition, and that the traditional view is that the cognition happens mainly in the brain, but studies are indicating, I don't know if there is the evidence is there that cognition is also in the body. And you talked about the environment, and that was like a kind of, okay, what and how? What do you mean? Because obviously you're not talking about the environment, our perception of the environment, by the environment itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
When I talk about the environment, I mean something that is outside the body. For example, when you want to think of something, you might take a pen and extend your cognition by writing. So it's like taking advantage of some object of the surrounding to extend your cognition. This is one thing. And the other is that the idea that around the fact that you don't really develop cognition just by it's not simply an internal process, it's really the context in which you are in, so that your cognition would have developed in a different way if either your body had had a different shape or the environment had been different or both. For example, if you are a fly, I guess you perceive the world in a different way than what you do now.
I do perceive the when you
You do.
fly, I perceive the world in totally different way. How did you know that I'm a fly? Oh no. But I guess what you're saying is that I can perceive my body also through the contact with my chair, no? With the chair.
Exactly. It's
Because
also the
the air is
context.
this temperature, it's something, it's like
Exactly.
a or
Yes, it's a dynamic thing. It's a closed loop between all three.
but the cognition, let's say, is not in it's not in the environment, it's with the contact of the environment. I would say the cognition is in my body, no?
It's the cognition develops out of the interplay, let's call it like that, between the three things: the mind, the body, and the environment. It's a closed loop that develops this cognition. I'm not saying that cognition lies in the objects around us. It's this interaction.
Okay. Then I have another. Sorry, maybe I will not do monologue. Maybe somebody else wants to comment something.
No, I just wanted to, because of this story now, there is maybe also interesting for your research. Maybe you can look into it as well. There is something called sensory deprivation chamber, where it's either a room or something like a solarium. I don't know if you know what a solarium is, like a
Yeah.
box. Yeah, but I wouldn't go into a box. I would rather go into a room which has a basin, like a tub, filled with water that has the same temperature as our body, as human body, and is salty, so salty that that the body can float, right? And people go there for different reasons, also meditation, also therapy, different things, really. But the main goal is not to have the environment, so to say, to eliminate the environment as much as possible, right? In order to see what happens with the mind, what happens with the body, what happens with the senses. Yes, I just wanted to share this.
Okay. I had no idea. It's the first time I hear of this chamber. Sounds like hell to me. Sorry. Um, well, I don't know what the incentive would be. I understand from what point of view you're coming. To just have a very calm environment, I guess, where you have no stimuli, so that it can work as a soothing environment, I guess, where you can focus on your internal, on your thoughts, I guess, right? Look into yourself, something like that.
Well, as I said, people use it for different reasons.
Okay.
But it's not always, as I read, it's not always suiting. Some people
Okay.
can't stand it, as you said. It sounds like hell to you. For me, it sounds nice.
It sounds like a way to treat overstimulation, because we also have overstimulation in our lives. So, yeah, I don't know what to comment about on that, but yeah, I guess
Stella,
that's her point.
No, I was just imagining different ways to maybe imagine your efforts. Why for me it would be very interesting to see how one could think from that position, let's say,
Okay.
or use the movement and imagine the imaginary elastic fabric.
Okay. Now I get what
And
you're saying.
yeah, from the state of, because when we sing, of course we can find the state of relaxedness, and when we play the instrument, it's the ideal way to make music, right? It's not that it always happens in a research or in a concert environment, right? So maybe to have no environment, or to eliminate as much as possible, like outside influence. That's why I mentioned this
Yeah, yeah.
in the
I got
first.
it. Okay.
Stella, can I ask you something about two things? About the video classes, the online classes. You made a mention that people, their experience when teaching online is that, if I understood correctly, you were saying that they felt it was incomplete, teachers or students, because the movement could not be really transmitted. Is this the case?
Well, yeah,
But why?
multisensory information. So,
But why, since
okay.
they, I mean, since they can see the teachers, I think we talked a bit briefly in Canada last time, no? But since you can see them, why doesn't this get through?
So, well, that's a very good point, and that's what I was trying to get out of this whole study. It's one single study, so it's all I can say is from that. So it appears that somehow when the teacher and the student are together in the same room, information is not transmitted purely visually. So I guess, if I may interpret that, it would mean that in a closed space, you have the vision, but you also have the acoustics, and also you have peripheral vision that you don't have through the video mediated classes. So peripheral vision plus sound in a closed room means that you have a better sense of a common space in which this interaction happens, is performed.
Yes.
So it appears that the fact that these do not, and also, to be honest, but this needs interpretation. Several people told me that that I can almost feel haptically the sound from the teacher. I can almost feel it on my skin.
Yes, yes. Sorry.
So there is the okay. So
So,
there's the haptics, there is the peripheral vision, there's the acoustics of the space. So the performance and the teaching context gets transmitted in through multiple senses that do not apply in the online case.
totally. I'm not. My question
Okay.
was not, isn't teaching through video and being in a room the same thing?
No,
No, because
no,
I
obviously.
repeat to you. But it was more kind of a question. The teachers, did they say, or the students, that, I can't really. What was the feedback exactly? That they said that the movements cannot really get through, or the student is not learning through them. This is what I didn't understand. Their
So
perception of what is limiting them, in the sense of, I don't know. I don't know if, when the teachers in the study music are teaching, if they're very conscious. Okay, you should do the same movement I'm doing.
okay, no, I don't think so,
Okay,
first of all.
so
Secondly, yeah, so my question was, always with these interviews, I start from very general questions, and I try not to give away, obviously, where I'm getting to and what I want to get out of this interview. So I was just asking, interviewing them about their experience, their online experience, and I was trying to also use a very recent theory of embodied cognition to place these ideas and somehow structure them in my mind. So one thing that inspired me really a lot was the discussion I had with Pelva Naik at Interdisciplinary, where I held an interview from her. Yeah, I think that's how we say it. And when I asked her things about this online thing, she told me what really bothers me from the worst thing I cannot stand is the limited space or the limited visual space.
Right.
So this started making me think that because she started telling me I'm not really bothered by disruptions in the sound that much. I mean, it happens, but okay, I can make up for that. But what really limits me and annoys me is the limited space, visual space. So this making sense to me because Hindustani have this really vivid imagery of pitch movement in terms of space. You sometimes see them, they move their eyes in space as if they're looking into the pitches and moving around them with the hands. So they have this very strong visual imagery of pitch in terms of space. So somehow it made sense that the main problem was not really the acoustics. It was, let's say, the uncoding of the perceived lesson in terms of space. And how is space perceived? And it's not one sensory modality only, it's several that are implicated. And one of the examples that Pelva gave me that really made sense was when she told me one of the problems is when you have a teacher sitting very far away from the camera, but he's closed-mic'd. So the mic is very close to the voice, to the mouth, but the image is very far away. So my brain cannot make up for what kind of space is he then after all. Okay, so it's she gets confused.
Yeah.
So I think the space was really the crucial thing, and it appears that in the face-to-face context, there is this shared space that teacher and student share, where this thing happens, which is kind of disrupted in the online context.
Yeah, okay, thanks. That makes sense. I mean, when you talk about the size, it intuitively it makes sense because I'm giving classes online and I've received also classes online. But one thing I've seen with online students is that many times what it's difficult to integrate and to learn and to work more is the movements of the head, movements of head that are maybe that in nail there are many movements of the head, diagonal, vertical. It can be many things. And sometimes we try, to give different perspectives. So you play, I will do this, and then I will show this way. But now you're talking, I was thinking also, of course, the three-dimensional view that the student has, or the contact of two persons that are in person, the advantage it has is that you're doing something and then I turn here and I have a new information, and
exactly.
every given moment my perception can get richer. I could go around you, but I don't have to, because just the way it's so rich, the information. And when you're seeing me every time like that, even if I turn like that, it's two, while the other case it's much more. And I would argue also that the sound, even if it's very good, it's something different. I think also psychological for me it's difficult to play sometimes very strong in the front of a computer, because many times it has also this intention of reaching the other person, the sound, through the room and to and this is a bit, sometimes you play loud and you say, okay, now maybe it's distorting or whatever. Of course, there are ways, but I mean, we're not talking about the if online or in-person teaching and learning is better, but connecting it with movement, I would add this thing of the sound in the sense.
This also came through in the interviews, and actually to clarify things. Of course, my motivation was not to say if it's good or bad. My motivation behind it is to pinpoint what the problems are, because if you pinpoint them, then you can also ask the correct questions to develop better technologies. So one way of dealing with it would be to say no, no online courses. We will only do it face to face, and that's obviously ideal. But in practice, we see that well, online has taken off. So I think the next better thing we can do is really ask the good questions so that we can develop better technologies. So three-dimensional, all these virtual reality perhaps ideas, surround sound and not surround sound, but spatial sound that can be transmitted online to the other side, and things like that need to be addressed. At least if we're talking about learning and teaching, because it's a context where you really need to get immersed, it seems, for the teaching class, for the class to be effective.
Yes, Fadil.
First of all, thanks, Stella and Christos, actually, for making this possible and sharing this content with us. I have two quick questions, Stella, if you bear with me. First question is, it's all about kinetic and like the big movements we use even in our speaking
Did you say
versus
Carnatic or
like
did I hear?
kinetic movement,
Kinetic. Sorry. Okay. Yes.
or kinetic.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
so I think both it's like a mega kinetic versus minimal one, where, for example, musicians use the most efficient movements that can make them play better and longer and more successful, right? Did you study this minimal kinetic movement with masters other than, the singing part? Because when they sing, they don't have an instrument with them, probably. This is one thing. And the other thing is, so what did you observe if you did? The other thing is, what are the applications that you have seen possible out of this study and research?
So for the first part, what I didn't know when I started the project and I found out on the way was that so as I told you, it started the idea took off with this workshop with Ustad Zia Faridun Dagar, and he was teaching us. So that's when really these gestures were so vivid and so great and so big and obvious. But then on the way, I realized that during performance, musicians themselves do not perform these gestures, first of all, so often, and secondly, so openly and extroverted and so obvious. So it's mainly the teaching context where you will see them more vividly. And this, I would say, makes sense in what sense that not that they after many years of practice they tend to internalize those movements. They don't need to make them obvious because of course they have to conserve some energy and they don't necessarily need to produce them, but they are more important when they teach. So if I would have gone back to doing my studies, like my study again, I would have selected the teaching context rather than the performance context. Only in that case, it's often the case that the teacher will give the phrase and the student will repeat it several times, so you will get far less data from this process. But actually, the teaching context would have been more, I think, a better choice. And also, we saw this kind of obvious association between effortful and then getting released and something that connects gesture, sound, and effort. But I don't think it's always a case like that. So I've had discussions where the musician would tell me that to produce, as I said also with the Yosamin Shah Hosseini, to produce a louder sound or a more intense sound, I might perform a gesture that has less effort. It's not as straightforward as it appears here. And obviously, you understand it's a research, so you collect a specific amount of data, you have a very specific focus, you find out something, you get some findings. But if you keep digging into it, you will find variations, you will find differences. So I think it's endless. It's not something. I'm not here to tell you that it's. This is the truth, obviously, because this is research. So this is part of the truth. So about minimal kinetics and all that, I think this has covered your first comment, and that's definitely true. The second, applications, I think I've covered that in the beginning. So the idea, my motivation was to be able to extract analytical descriptions of relationships between gesture and sound through effort, which would be able to allow me to develop interactions that are more effective, where you can prime somebody by telling him, think of stretching something and do that gesture and see how you can control the sound in a more intuitive way, by taking into account this idea of effort and force feedback and, all this imitation. So yeah, these would be the main application out of it.
Thank you.
In terms of education and online education, I think it would be all these developments around new technologies for allowing more effective online teaching, like VR and spatial audio and all that. Thank you.
Stella, could it lead to let's say to a deepening or improvement of the way we understand music itself?
Yeah, I think the discussion, I mean, when I started reading about all this stuff, it made more sense to me. And also it made more sense connecting it with discussions I've had with Zia Wahiduddin Dagar when I was in India. So at some point, I really wanted, the second time I went just for music. And at some point I couldn't stand the heat and the humidity because it was the end of the raining season. And I felt I wanted to go out of the place and walk a bit. So I turned to him and said, Ustad, I want to go out and walk a bit. And he said, oh, you want to go out all the time. But, music, you make first in the mind. So I just sit there he would sit for hours long in his bed. And you would see he was not asleep. Sometimes he was, but many times he was not asleep. He was just there, and I think he was really processing things in his mind. And another very interesting thing he told me once, and Bahaudin, his nephew, told me once too, was the fact that he was obsessed. He loved martial art films, Tsaki-chan and stuff like that. So this was really weird for me, but by discussing it with Bahaudin, he told me, when I see these movements, I start making connections to sound. So I see a movement, and for me, it translates into something that I could do musically. So it's not just sitting there passively. I think it's a very active engagement with the movement, you see. And I think this could be a very nice thing to take away from this whole discussion, I guess.
I don't know if you know of Nick Bartz. He's
this rings a bell. Wait, tell me more.
A bell or a gong?
A gong.
Well, yeah. He's a pianist. He's Swiss. He's has these groups called Ronin and Mobile. He's recording for ECM the last more than 10
I
years.
think I know him. I think I know him.
He has this. He's also a teacher and practitioner of Aikido and Zen Buddhism.
I saw him. Now I remembered. I saw him like a couple of months ago with Yeah,
and he's talking. You saw him live, you mean?
Yeah, I saw him live in Thessaloniki. Yes. No.
He came in Thessaloniki. Nice.
Yeah.
So he's talking a lot, and his musical creation and practice has to do with common understandings. I would put in this way, between music making sound, and also movement, and also the where they come from the inner state that they come from. And he talks a lot about the martial art philosophy also, and in Aikido at least, about this emptiness and about what does it mean, tension, not tension. He has a book that's very interesting. I don't know if I have it here. Listening, movement, sound, I think, or something like that. 3 words, maybe rearranged. It's interesting, and he just actually released also a YouTube series of a kind of documentary about his work with some film makers. So from Myla, maybe it will be extra interesting as we talk. You're a filmmaker, so yeah, it's
Okay. Yes, I saw him live, and I remember I saw the image and I checked him out, and I saw this connection with Aikido, but I didn't know the rest. I didn't check the rest. So that's very interesting.
because he's very eloquent and very precise also in what he's doing and how he's describing it. So yeah, it's worth.
Excellent.
What was the name, sorry, of the person?
Nick Bart, Nick with a K, and the
Yes.
Bart, you write it RTSCH, if I'm not mistaken.
RTS Parts.
Yeah, I think so. Or Bertz with an
Yes,
I'm
yeah, I
I'm
don't
not
know how to
sure.
pronounce it. I will send it to you, Maya.
All right.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any? Yes, somebody wants to the Guillem, yeah? I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it correctly.
My name is Estelle.
Okay.
Just very short, I make a links also with puppetry because I'm doing puppetry, Japanese puppetry with bunraku, and they play with the voice and the musician. And when I hear you talking about movement, sound, I hear that because when I see puppet playing with the voice outside, I see the movement of the sound through the body of the puppet, and it reminds me that. Just wanted to say this.
That could make a very nice study, in fact. That's very interesting. Nice point.
Yes, and the Japanese people have a lot of words, very precise words for what we don't have in French, for example. They have a very precise words to say that to talk about sound, for example.
Okay. So you go often to Japan, I guess, or you I know.
No, I
Okay.
have a master. He was coming in France 2 weeks, so it's not very often, but it's a precious work, I think. And I want to continue this because it opened my mind when you talk about this and when there is other people who are researching about this. I'm very happy to know you.
Okay, nice meeting you. Yeah, too.
Okay, so maybe we can close the conversation. Thank you so much, Stella.
I thank you very much.
Sharing all this really very, very interesting and new, I think, to most of us, like subject. And thank you everyone for participating, and see you sooner than later now if you join next time, 30th of June, with the Viennese Vulgaris, about how Greeks during Amane, or Turkish people, what they do with their hands. No, I'm joking. But it will be about vocal improvisation and the Amane. Thank you so much and have a good week and good night.
Ευχαριστούμε. Καληνύχτα.
Bye bye.
Bye, everybody. Oh.
Thank you.